Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Mao Rongqiang, and I'm very happy to invite Dr. Hannah John Kim to do our fourth reporting live abroad. Today, she's talking to us from Seoul, South Korea. The topic is the attitude towards foreigners in South Korea. Dr. Hannah Kim is an assistant professor at the Graduate School of International Studies at Sogang University and a political scientist specializing in comparative politics. She received her PhD in political science at the University of California, Irvine. Before joining Sogang Graduate Studies in International Studies, Graduate School of International Studies. She worked as an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and a postdoc doctor scholar at the Walter Shorenstein Asian Pacific Research Center at Stanford University. Her academic interests include public opinion, gender, and democracy in East Asia. And her research has been published in multiple peer-reviewed journals and public-facing outlets, including the Journal of Politics, Pacific Affairs, and the Washington Post. My friend, I thank you so much for joining us for this great event. So please help me welcome Dr. Hannah to give her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me. I wish I could visit Omaha again, but hopefully I can in the future. So I'm going to be giving a brief presentation on public attitudes towards foreigners in South Korea. And in order to kind of talk about this, it's also important to talk a little bit about the current situation in Korea in terms of the population as well as the current demographics. So right now, Korea is struggling with what has been described as the growing gray population because there's been a decline in the population rates. Currently, the fertility rate is 0.78 births for women per woman. And if you look at the graph on the bottom right, you can actually see how it has declined so much over time. So as of 2022, the rate was around 0.78 births per woman. But if you look from 1960 and onwards, it's been on a continuous decline. And I'm not sure if it's very visible, but there's also a yellow line, or sorry, the green line that compares with the United States. And the United States is relatively more equal. There hasn't been as much of a decline, but in Korea, we're definitely seeing the rate decline significantly. And in addition to this, there's a growing gray population. We have a larger, older population relative to the younger population. And because of the situation, the population peaked in 2020 and it's been on decline since then. And according to some statistics, by 2050, Korea's elderly population will account for 44%. And by 2100, Korea's population may end up being half of what it is now. So it's a bit of a bit concern right now in Korea because of how much the population is declining. And part of the reason why this is the case is because more Koreans are opting not to have children. There are a lot of issues related to employment insecurity. People are not able to secure good jobs and they're unable to maintain these strong jobs. And also there's increasing competition. The deteriorating economic conditions of the country are also essentially incentivizing a lot of young people to not have children. The housing prices here are extremely expensive, and it's very difficult for young people to buy apartments. And so instead of having children, a lot of people are having pets instead. So there have been a lot of articles talking about how in Korea right now, more people are buying pet strollers, so dog strollers, more than baby strollers. And this is actually a bit of a problem because not everyone who has a pet has a stroller, but everyone who has a baby has a stroller. So we're already seeing that the disparity is actually getting bigger than what we might imagine. And so, because of this, these issues related to population decline, we're already seeing concerns related to the declining working age population. There are less people in the workforce. This will eventually become a burden on public pensions and healthcare because a large majority of the population will need pensions. Also, for children, a lot of elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools are closing down already. A lot of universities in outside of Seoul are also closing down. Children hospitals are closing, and which means that there are less opportunities for children to find clinics nearby if they're sick. And so there are a lot of concerns related to population collapse in Korea. And so, because of this, along with this, there's also been a growing foreigner population in Korea as well. So, since the 1980s, there have been an influx of labor workers as well as other types of foreigners who have come to live in Korea, including foreign spouses, and others. And in late 1991, that's where we really saw the influx of foreign workers come into Korea as well. And because of this, we're seeing this immigration boost helped Korea develop into a multicultural society. And so the Korean government has been working to push and embrace immigration policies that will now focus on promoting multiculturalism. So in 2004, the employment permit program started for foreigners. In 2005, there was a basic plan for policy towards foreigners. In 2009, the first basic plan for immigration policy. 2012, the second basic plan for immigration policy. And essentially, these policies, along with this influx, have helped inbound immigration increase rapidly and has potentially helped Korea develop into a multicultural society. And so we're seeing Korea change from being one of the most homogenous nations in the world to now becoming a more multi-ethnic and multicultural society. So in 2000, the year 2000, foreigners made up 0.5% of the population. Now, as of last year, foreigners make up 4.89% of the population. So we're seeing the proportion grow quite a bit, not just because there are a lot of foreigners coming in, but also because of population decline. So we're seeing the proportion grow. And according to the OECD, the definition of a multicultural nation is if that country has at least 5% of the population consists of foreigners. So Korea is slowly becoming what has been officially defined as a multicultural nation. And the surge in foreigners has also helped the population grow in Korea as well. So while there have been an influx of foreigners, there's also a lot of positive sentiment towards foreigners. You know, a lot of these foreign workers have bolstered the country's workforce. They've also increased the number of multicultural families. It's also increased social capital, right? There's a lot of trust in Korea. Um, the interesting thing that I hear from a lot of foreigners living in Korea is that you can drop your wallet or leave it somewhere and no one will steal it, right? And that's one of the nice things about Korea. And so there's increasing social capital and um, a lot of highly educated people, a lot of people with strong democratic values. They are more likely to show pro-foreigner sentiment. And the government has also pushed for multiculturalism and diversity and inclusion. And part of this is because of what has been described as contact theory. So, as people in the host community have more interactions and more communications with people from different parts of the world, these interactions will help create more positive sentiment and they'll start to view each other as neighbors and friends and people that they can trust. But along with pro-foreigner sentiment, there's also been a lot of anti-foreigner sentiment. And part of this is because there's a lot of nationalism in Korea. So a lot of people may feel pride as being one country. This has often been described as ethnic nationalism in Korea, where there is this focus on the bloodline. And so because of that, there can be some increasing anti-foreigner sentiment. Also, differing ideologies and religions can also lead to clashes with foreigners living in Korea. And as a result of that, there's increasing conflict. And in general, a lot of xenophobia, as well as implicit and explicit forms of discrimination, particularly among older people who have not had a lot of interactions with foreigners living in Korea. And part of the reason why we see this discrimination is because a lot of the foreign workers who come here work in the labor market, meaning that they end up taking on jobs that have been described as the 3Ds, which are dirty, dangerous, and demeaning jobs. And so there is definitely this class issue as well, where we're seeing discrimination based on the type of work that these foreign workers are doing. And in addition to all of this, for many blue collar workers, they feel as though their jobs are being taken away. And for the general population, they feel as though their resources are being taken away. And this is often described as group threat, where people in the host community feel as though their opportunities, their resources, and everything, which are all scarce, there's a zero-sum aspect to this. So they feel as though their opportunities and resources are being taken away. So this is often called group threat. So we're seeing both contact increasing pro-foreigner sentiment, but also group threat increasing anti-foreigner sentiment as well. And so in terms of the different foreigner groups living in Korea, the large majority consists of ethnic Koreans from China. And then we see people from Vietnam, also Chinese citizens, as well as people from Thailand, Uzbekistan, the US, and many more. And because of these increasing foreigner groups, we're also seeing the growth of multicultural families. And among these multicultural families, the children, the majority of multicultural children come from one parent coming from China, including those that are Korean Chinese as well. And so there's definitely a large group of people from China coming in among all of these different foreigners. But at the same time, Korea has actually shown a lot of negative attitudes towards China. Right? A lot of statistics have shown that 81% of South Korean respondents have expressed negative sentiments towards China. And part of this is from the foreign policy level, where China's response to THAAD has not been received well in Korea, but also because there's this cultural clash right now where in China, a lot of Chinese internet users have been commenting by saying that the Korean traditional dress, the hanbok, as well as the Korean traditional food, kimchi, is originally from China. And so Koreans have been responding negatively to this, and they're saying this is ours. And so there has been this cultural conflict growing that has led to this increasing negative sentiment towards China as well. But most importantly, we're actually seeing the highest level of negative attitudes towards Chinese Koreans. So those that are ethnically Korean who lived in China, who now live in Korea. And the thing is, a lot of these Chinese Koreans who are called 조선족, they worked in white collar jobs in China, but they end up moving to Korea and taking on blue collar jobs. And so they've already taken a step back in terms of their careers, but they're also being viewed negatively and being in Korea as well. And there's significantly more negative sentiment towards Chinese Koreans more so than any other foreigner group. And so this statistic here is actually from a survey that I had run a few years ago, asking about favorability towards different groups. And what I found is that, and this was among young people, and what I found is that there was the least amount of favorability towards Chinese Koreans more so than other groups of foreigners. And the question is why, right? Why is it that Chinese Koreans, so 조선족, are viewed more negatively than other groups? And part of the reason why may be group threat, as I mentioned before, there are the issues of job security. A lot of blue collar workers in Korea may be worried about their jobs, but a lot of this is also because of media portrayal. A lot of Korean movies make Chinese Koreans look bad in the movies. So a lot of Joseonjuk are viewed as gangsters or, people who do very bad things. And because of the way they're portrayed in movies, a lot of people just grow this kind of negative sentiment. Also, as I mentioned, the Joseon족 population is the largest in Korea, and because of their large size, that can also lead to increasing group threat. But also, there are issues related on the government level of poor immigration policies, right? Governments are not providing this group enough opportunities and also not helping these groups become viewed more favorably, as well as poor multicultural promotion. And this is also particularly growing among young Koreans, which is actually concerning because we would often assume that older, more traditional people are going to have more negative perceptions, but it's actually young people who are showing worsening perceptions. And part of this may be because of the media, as I mentioned before, but also because of the internet. A lot of young Chinese people and a lot of young Koreans have been in an internet war where they're commenting on each other and, create and fighting with each other. And they're increasing sentiment on both sides. But also, young Koreans have a very strong sense of nationalism. And so, because of that, with the hanbok and kimchi issues, we're definitely seeing this growing clash, as well as just difficulties in life that are increasing just anger. And so because of that, there are a lot of concerns in the Korean context because Korea is a democracy, right? Korea has developed economically very quickly, but because of that, there has also been issues of compressed modernity where, especially young people are struggling with various forms of social inequality. And because of their grievances, they're actually lashing out to other groups, including foreigners. And there's also, in general, just increasing hostility and trepidation towards foreigners living in Korea, particularly among older generations, because they're just not accustomed to this. And so we're seeing this growing hostility on from both the young generation as well as the older generation. But the problem is that Korea is growing into a great population, meaning that there's already issues of population decline, and there is this need and demand for Korea to become multicultural, but the people, the sentiment is also not following along with this. So there's a disconnect between transforming Korea into a multicultural society as well as increasing xenophobia, particularly among Chinese and Chinese Koreans, even though Korea needs a larger group of foreigners to live here in order for it to sustain its population. This is especially concerning because people from China and Chinese Koreans are Joseon족 are one of the largest groups. So it's important to create more cultural unity, if anything. And so in order for Korea to develop into a multicultural society, the government does need to implement better policies to help foreigners integrate in living in South Korea. That's not necessarily just economic or financial, but to help in terms of creating a more united society and to help these foreigners integrate into society, but also the government needs to focus on improving the images of foreigners in South Korea as well. So these negative portrayals on the media, right? These things need to stop. There need to be more positive images and show how there is better cultural integration if everyone can work together and live together. And so there need to be better efforts made to create more positive sentiments. Part of part of the way in which we can do this is by increasing more contact, showing them that showing Korean citizens that these people are our neighbors, our friends, they could potentially be family. And so in order to kind of just improve contact, I think that would help a lot. And in that way, we might end up seeing a new type of Korea that's more vibrant, more unique. Well, we can have a larger group of diverse group of people who can call Korea home. And there will also be less issues related to population decline. And most importantly, we might see less pet strollers and maybe more baby strollers instead in the future, right? So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
What a great talk, Hannah. Thank you so much. It's so interesting, so interesting. Um, and now I'm taking advantage of me as the host here. I'm going to have the first question. What about the Koreans towards Americans in South Korea? Because there are plenty Americans there also in South Korea.
Yeah, so there's definitely differing sentiment towards the US relative to China in particular, and we definitely see this when, depending on which administration is in power. Right. So when we see the conservative political party in power, there's increasingly more positive sentiment towards the US and increasingly negative sentiment towards China as well as North Korea. But when we have the progressive party in power, there is increasing anti-US sentiment and in, and better in and more positive sentiment towards China as well as North Korea. And so we really saw this in the early 2000s when there was a surge in increasing anti-US sentiment, right? When we saw the mad cow disease in the US, and that led to a ban of US beef in Korea. And a lot also at the same time, there were two high schools or junior high students, female students were killed by a US truck, which then led to increasing anti-US sentiment. But at the same time, it is the government that is kind of pushing certain types of narratives, right? And so in the early 2000s, it was the Progressive Party that was in power and pushing more of this anti-US sentiment. But right now, we have the Conservative Party in power. And because we have the Conservative Party in power, we definitely see more favorable attitudes towards the US and increasingly negative attitudes towards China. But the thing is that also can be shown among foreigners in Korea, living in Korea as well, right? So Americans living in Korea are viewed a bit more favorably right now than Chinese foreigners or 조선족 in Korea.
Oh, Chinese. I know that you
I
also
know,
have a
I'm
hard time in
sorry.
Japan too.
I'm sorry.
No, no, no. I totally understand. Good. I have great friends right here, Rich and Betty Tatsam. Please join Hannah for questions, please.
Um, all of the meeting topic, what does the Korean people think of Trump?
The big question. You know, in many ways, it's very similar to the US, right? In the US, there's increasing polarization when it comes to politics, right? We're definitely seeing um, more people who really like Trump, as well as more people who really don't like Trump. And we're definitely seeing that same extremities in Korea as well. And this was very clear the last few weeks as the US elections were taking place, because people in Korea know more about US politics than Korean politics right now. It's amazing because I will give lectures on the current US political climate, but the audience knows more than I do, which is amazing. And so we definitely see the polarization in Korean politics, but also among American politics as well. So there are certain demographics that view Trump very favorably, and certain demographics that view Trump very unfavorably. But the interesting thing is that in the US, we have this group of young men who are very supportive of Trump, right? And they have played a very important role in helping Trump win his second term. In Korea, it's very similar because there are young men in Korea who really, really support Trump. They admire Trump and they view him as a very strong leader who gets things done. And they compare him to the political leaders in Korea by saying that someone like Trump would get things done. So we're definitely seeing the same demographic here supporting Trump as in the US. And it's very interesting to kind of compare that because we would assume that it may potentially be older people who lived through a more authoritarian time in Korea that may view Trump a little bit more favorably, but it's not. It's actually the younger population. So there's been a lot of political chaos in the past few weeks in Korea, and I can imagine it was probably a little bit stronger in the US.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I have one. Yeah, I have one question. As I hear your lectures, I hear very similar to the situation in Japan in terms of demographics, declining population, and losing work labor forces and so forth. Uh, and I do feel that it sounded like Japan is a little behind the effort that the Korean has made so far. I think that the relationship between Korea and Japan are improving these days. To be honest, the connection was disconnected for the later part of your lecture. So I don't know whether it spoke about Japan or not, but I'm wondering what the sentiment towards Japanese people now in Korea in general.
Yeah, and I think the Korea-Japan dispute is always a very interesting one too. I've kind of focused this talk on China, but the US is also very interesting here, and Japan is also very interesting. And there are so many different ways to look at this, but similar to China, but actually in the complete opposite way, sentiment towards Japan increases when the Conservative Party is in power. And whereas sentiment towards Japan or favorability decreases when the Progressive Party is in power. So right now, we currently have the Conservative Party in power. And because of that, relations with Japan have improved because there has been the Camp David summit, right, with the US, Japan, and Korea. And also with the new prime minister in Japan, Prime Minister Ishiba, who has at least explicitly shown favorability towards Korea. And also, in terms of sentiment as well, President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishiba, as well as current Prime Minister Ishiba, have all been working together relatively closely. And they've actually shown a lot of favorability towards each other. And this has also simultaneously been seen among the public as well, where public sentiment towards Japan has improved quite a bit. We definitely see the Progressive Party still showing anti-Japanese sentiment. So when the Fukushima water release happened last year, one of the former political candidates, Lee Jae-myung, who's part of the Democratic Party, he had a hunger strike to protest against the release of the water in Fukushima. But because the Conservative Party is in power, it was not very effective, right? And the protests were not very effective. And so right now, favorability towards Japan is relatively high. Also, and because the Japanese yen was relatively weaker than the Korean won for a while, a lot of people have been traveling to Japan. And so,
That's right.
yeah, so Koreans traveling to Japan will say they see more Koreans than Japanese right now because there are so many Koreans traveling
Oh,
there.
yeah, I agree.
And so in many ways,
Yeah.
there's increasing favorability.
Yeah, I'm sure that the time is running out, but my last question, I'm in Tokyo right now, so I see that the news every day that North Korea is trying to disconnect the relationship with South Korea, and that seems to be very, what do you call it, extraordinary uh, action they're
Yeah.
taking it. We are also concerned about that situation.
Yeah.
What do you see about that?
Yeah,
How do you see it?
I think even today they disconnected the electricity that South Korea provides by the border. And even this earlier this year, Kim Jong-un's technically his New Year address, even though it came a little bit later, he no longer views South Korea as a comrade. They were very clear in their New Year address that South Korea is no longer their partner or their friend. They have made that very clear. And with, these North Korean troops being sent into the Russia-Ukraine war on Russia's side, we definitely see that the relationship between Russia and North Korea has become so strong that has led North Korea to sever ties with its neighboring countries, including South Korea, and I'm assuming Japan as well. But that's, I think, part of the reason why the trilateral summit between the US, Japan, and South Korea is so important because that it is a security-based agreement, right? Whereas Japan, South Korea, and the US all acknowledge the troubles that North Korea may be potentially, or has been showing for the past few months. But again, this comes back to Trump, right? Is Trump going to continue on with this trilateral summit? That's the big question, because Prime Minister Ishiba has been part of it. President Yoon is still part of it. The only change we're going to see is this change from Biden to Trump, right? And so the security dilemma, I think, will definitely we'll see it change during the Trump administration.
Yeah,
Hannah,
that's great.
I have a quick
because
question. Oh,
yeah.
go ahead. Are you done?
Yeah, no, please. Becky.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a quick question for you, and maybe you can answer this. Since the population in South Korea is like declining, what will the future of how would that affect colleges later on?
So this is actually a problem right now as well, because we're seeing a lot of universities in rural areas shutting down already. It has started, and a lot of professors are worried about their jobs because the universities are closing down. We are definitely seeing less enrollment, less applications in terms of students. And so we've seen universities shut down in rural areas. At least for the time being, colleges in Seoul, in like the main capital city, are fine. But 30 years down the line, we don't know how it's actually going to look. We're actually seeing some, schools combining together among elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. So we may potentially see something like that among universities also. But there definitely is an issue with less student enrollment. And we actually saw this happen with there are some female-only universities here. And because there are less students, they're trying to change their universities to become co-ed. But there was actually a backlash, a lot of student protests because they were against it. So the university stopped thinking about this. So from the university end, this is actually quite a bit of a problem.
Well, do they have a population control, like you only have one child, two child? Is there something like that in South Korea, like they had in China?
They're trying to push people to have more babies. They're trying to provide more financial incentives, better, like the nursery care, things like that. If you have more children, they will try to provide as many and more better incentives. If anything, it's the complete opposite right now. And also, as I mentioned, they're trying to increase their foreigner student population as well, just to kind of combat the issues at least at the university level.
Does the government have anything to do with the population control, or is there a reason other than economics and financial situations, or is it the government involved with that?
So in terms of actual policies, there isn't anything that specifically prevents or limits that, but because there are just less opportunities. So young people right now in Korea, they call themselves the giving up generation, where they have to give up three things: dating, marriage, and I think having a job. And that's what they call themselves, because they have to give up all of these things. And so it's just it's the kind of environment, the societal environment, where they feel as though they just don't have many opportunities. And because of that, they've basically just given up, and that's the problem, because we want to provide them more opportunities, not less. But that has been the kind of the overall sentiment.
Well, I'm just so proud that I was once on the same panel with Hannah Kim at UNO, and Rich actually attended that panel about Taiwan, democracy, and China, I remember. Anyway, Hannah, you don't know how joyful that we listen to you, and together, like Tadashi's talk on China-Japan relations. We're going to have the website link available and sent to many other councils to enjoy it. In fact, I'm just so happy that we were developed on the basis of what we are doing, reporting live from abroad. It's a very favorable things to do, short but informative. So I thank you so much, really. Now, December 10th, we're going to have our 5th live reporting from India. The topic is called Revisiting Gandhian Value in Contemporary Context by a famous professor in philosophy in India. So at that time we were sent, and Betty and I will send you, promise you, and send Hassan too, a certificate and also enjoyable, appreciative letter for you, digital format very soon. So we just want to give you our deep appreciation, really, and thank Betty and Rich and Tetson and myself to join you. But we will make a good YouTube out of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really fun. Thank you.
Happy
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's thank you so much for coming for this.
Is he gone?
Well, yeah,
Oh, he's here. Yeah, it's
no,
okay.
my,
We can hear
yeah,
you.
my connection is bad, so
It's okay.
sometimes
Yeah.
you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
yeah,
We can hear you.
thanks.
So we are
okay,
drafting
get-
the appreciation letter that's signed by Betty and me and send it over to you. For Hannah, it's even more
Okay.
important because she's going to be tenured and promotion. She needs a certificate like that to help her.
Okay.
At the same time, I really think, Tessa and Betty give me some advice. I'm really thinking of having each time in the future 5 speakers from different countries talking about the same title, about public attitude towards foreigners in South Korea, in Japan, in Bangladesh, in Mexico, in France. Have a panel like that, because it seems to me people are interested in this kind of topic.
You said public attitude
Public attitude towards foreigners in
towards
South Korea,
foreigners.
in China, in Japan, in Mexico, in Spain, in Germany, things like that. It's really good project. People would love to hear that kind of things, you see.
Are you talking about mixing all the countries together, or are you going to talk to them one at a time?
Missing together. 5 people each time, because you only have 25 minutes. So each one have 5 minutes to talk. 5 times, and the next time is 5 people, but from different countries. It's a, public attitudes lecture series, something like that. That would be very nice on a particular time on that. I mean, you have only 5 minutes to talk about your country's attitude, citizens' attitude towards foreigners. And then we see how it relate to each other. When she talked about that, I thought about the article I give to my class about Japanese attitude towards China. 79% are negative, and she said 83% towards Chinese. That's so bad.
Well, China is bad. What do you expect? They're not